I'm in a house full of Japanese maples in Oregon. We're at Buckholt's Nursery filming a few videos with Matt and Tim from Mr. Maple. I actually purchased this nursery a few years ago from one of the great introducers of Japanese maples, Talon Buckholtz, and this land actually goes through 3 generations of maple growers now, which is kind of fun that the land would continue to be used, you know, for this purpose. Incredible collection of plants in the ground here. We've done a video, we've done a walkthrough video, a tour. We've done a conifer video with Matt and Tim, a Japanese maple video with Matt and Tim, some Japanese maples that have been in the ground for 50 years here in this garden. Some of the absolute originals of some of the varieties that are out on the market. Some of the more popular ones that are out on the market are in this, planted around me here. I've come inside because it's raining, and you can probably hear that rain hitting the top of the greenhouse throughout this video, but got to hide a little bit from the rain. It's a cold rain too. It's like 55 degrees and raining, so it'll kind of cut through you after a while. Let's see, the weekly garden planner is $50 off over on the website. The code to get it is up on the screen. It's through the rest of October, so there's like maybe 2 more weeks as I'm filming this that you can take advantage of that. There's some t-shirts on the website that are on sale as well. And the tickets for next year's open garden are already available, and some people have purchased tickets already. We're developing each year. I want to make that a bigger event. And so last year, Juniper Level Botanic Garden was open to folks to go and tour it, and people did other things as well. We're adding to that. And so we're hoping to make that a fun event for people to come to Raleigh and see lots of different things. Let's see, I think that's all I have to say before we jump into some questions. There are 21 questions. I shot 2 Q&A videos at Aaron's house like a week and a half ago as you're watching this. 2.5 weeks ago as you're watching this. So you will have seen 2 Q&As. So the questions aren't necessarily lining up with when you asked them last week or next week or whatever. I'm going to shoot another one in a couple days as well from those 2. So these questions may be from 2 weeks ago, they may be from 1 week ago, they may be from 3 weeks ago. We're just picking ones as we go, and we can film sometimes when we're traveling, we can't necessarily find a great place to film. And so when I get an opportunity to film inside a beautiful, there's hundreds and hundreds of grafted Japanese maples in here, various varieties. When I get an opportunity to film in a space like this, we'll film a couple at one time. Anyway, okay, so let's go. One of the videos a couple of the videos we've shot recently had Heptacodium in them, and great plant. And it's like a plant that you can have in the north that's similar to a crepe myrtle. White flowering, like Natchez crepe myrtles, gets the exfoliating bark, gets pollinators when they're in flower, and then they get this red calyx that's quite beautiful after that. They're listed for zones 5 to 9, so they can be planted in Texas where it can be 113 degrees. I don't think you're going to see them there. You would plant a crepe myrtle there if you wanted that similar look and habit. That's a plant that we just don't see in the South at all. When we get to maybe upper Virginia and going north, we'll start to see more and more Heptacodium, and then across the entire northern part of the country here to, you know, filmed a couple in Oregon at the Bennett Botanic Garden. I don't know, I think you have seen a walkthrough video from the Bennett Botanic Garden beforehand, and we do a video with the owner that will probably be after this one from that beautiful botanic garden. It was in East Oregon. But that, again, you just not, it's too hot and probably even too humid for them in our area. That doesn't mean you won't ever see one. I have seen them in the South, but far more of them in the north. Number 2, best time to size control Pygnanthemum muticum, now or in the spring. So Pygnanthemum is mountain mint, is native to areas of a large swath of the eastern United States. It's the perennial plant of the year for this year or next year. I don't know when they do that. The Perennial Plant Association names the perennial plant of the year. This is the first time, I think, ever that a straight species perennial won, not a named cultivar or anything. This is just a straight species of Pygnanthemum muticum was named perennial plant of the year. So that was pretty wild that happened. So with our native perennials, it's really best to cut them down in the spring. and not in the fall, because some of them do have hollow stems. There are insects that will take advantage of these things standing in the garden through the winter time. So we tend to prune all of the non-native perennials down in the fall, and all the native perennials we leave standing through the winter time. So things like black-eyed Susans or coneflowers, or, you know, we'll leave standing. A lot of our perennials in our garden are native perennials, and we'll leave those standing until spring, even mid to late spring, when the new growth is definitely already coming up from last year's growth. This person's in zone 6. They have a fig that dies to the ground. Then it grows rapidly back to 8 feet. It's not enough time to get the fruit to fully mature. Anything that can be done to hurry fruiting. So this happens a lot. You know, you'll probably get the occasional year in zone 6 where it doesn't get killed to the ground, just based on whatever winter weather you have that particular year. We were at that Bennett Botanic Garden, and he's got a Chicago Hardy fig that this year had mature fruit on it, because it was the first year that it hadn't died to the ground. So if you do happen to get a year that it doesn't get killed to the ground, you know, you will probably end up with mature fruit on it. In the meantime, you can play with this a little bit. So those figs don't really have an off switch, and they tend to grow right up until the time that you get a frost or a freeze. Once it sets those figs on it, and you probably have all you're going to get for the season, I would tip that new growth out of it toward the end of the season. And that hopefully will put that energy. What we need to do is get energy into that fig, finishing those figs, rather than growing more plant. And so you can tip prune it once you realize how many, you know, once you see, I think that's all the figs I could possibly get this season. Tip prune it. Another strategy you can use is to take some of the figs off of it. So it may have too many figs on it for them to finish. There's no amount of fertilizing or anything like that that would do this. Really, you need to make the plant. You can take some of the older leaves out of the center of it. What we want to do is just say, put the energy into the figs, please, and stop trying to grow. Maybe that will help you. But I think more likely is you're just going to get the occasional lucky winter where it doesn't get killed to the ground, and you'll get figs that way, just where they have more time during the season. This person, their fall mulch plan to save money, they want to use 80% grass clippings and 20% chopped leaves, because shredded mulch is just too expensive and the chip drop's not available in their area. Is there any issues with mulching with these? The grass clippings are aged and not hot. So green materials, especially, you know, when you apply them to something, they can get hot, and which potentially is an issue. I doubt at the thickness you're using it as mulch, it would be an issue. No, not at all. The only issue with anytime you're mulching with grass clippings is, are there weed seeds in it? Are you adding additional work to the beds later? You know, as long as you're cutting the grass before it's setting seed, and you don't have weeds in it that are putting seed in it. Because if it's not compost, aged is one thing, composted is another. If you compost it, you could get those seeds gone. But if it's just aged, those seeds are still going to be viable. So that's the only question I would have. But no, heck no, use any organic material you have. But if it's going to add a lot of additional work because you're throwing weed seeds right on top of the soil, and you're giving them a perfect little moisture barrier spot to germinate in the spring, then that would not be fun. What is the purple, maroon, red clump of flowers in the Holden video? I don't know at what point this was, but Steph had looked it up, and it's Persicaria. We did a tour video with Aaron. I think that will be up. It was up yesterday a week ago. The Saturday before, you'll have seen this particular video right here. I got to figure out where I'm at. About 8 days ago, we did a tour video with Aaron and talked about Persicaria, or mountain fleece is a common name for it. We saw it in Iceland. We saw it in the Netherlands a lot. It showed up in a lot of videos there, and then at Aaron's as well. We don't grow that one in the south quite as much. Tends to get zones 4 to 8. But in my zone 8 Raleigh garden, I just don't see it being grown quite as much in our area. And it gets like 3 to 4 feet by 3 to 4 feet and blooms with these kind of spiky flowers on it. They're super, super interesting. And we saw them in the Netherlands and in Belgium in quite a bit of shade as well. It's a perennial that will take a little more shade and perform quite well. It gets a little bit taller in shady spaces, is what we saw in Europe, but blooms right up until first frost. So it is a really good perennial. But Persicaria. Thoughts on pre-emergence? Well, I used a lot of pre-emergence when I was in the nursery business. We couldn't, pulling weeds out of these containers is just, there's so much labor and so much cost in it. So there are very good pre-emergent herbicides for the nursery industry to use over the top of these plants to prevent weeds even from growing on the floor here in the greenhouse and in the containers as well. We have seen a change toward using rice hulls and peanut hulls and shells and little disc that you might see on top of the soil in the containers now to prevent weeds. So there is some work around trying to reduce the amount of herbicide. Plus some of these herbicides, these pre-emergent herbicides, can be a little tough on the plants. And so this little lace leaf Japanese maple here, if it happens to be slightly moist in here and I'm broadcasting that pre-emergent herbicide, if it sticks to the foliage a little bit on this, it can cause a little bit of burn potentially on the foliage. And certainly this, whatever this Japanese maple was going to cost, at retail is now, may have to keep it another year, grow it out another year to get it clean foliage again. So I'm just talking about the nursery business right now. Obviously this person's not talking about the nursery business, but I am saying that there's a lot that goes into preventing weeds in a nursery to keep the labor less. This rain's getting heavier. I hope I'm not yelling too much into the microphone, but I might be, thinking that this is so loud. But in the landscape, I've never used a pre-emergent herbicide. I know a lot of people use preen or other pre-emergent herbicides or pre-emergent herbicides in their turf. I never have. I don't want to use those chemicals in the soil at my house. We've gotten rid of our lawn entirely, so I don't have lawn weeds to worry about. So I cut out the lawn pre-emergent if I was ever going to use one, and I never have in my own lawn, although I've sold lots of it in the garden centers that I worked at or owned in the past. So, I have a lot of familiarity with it, but I've never used it ever. And then once I got rid of all my lawn, now I'm just need to prevent weeds in my beds, and I've done that by staying on top of weeding. Okay, by pulling the weeds before they seed themselves. I'm reducing that seed bank, and I'm trying to, not have to use any chemicals in there. I'll let you decide what to do on it. I'm sure preen is highly effective, in preventing some weeds. You got to be careful what you use it over. Read it carefully. Make sure that you're not putting it over. Some plants are more sensitive to these pre-emergent herbicides than others. It can hurt the plant. It can be a growth inhibitor on some plants. It can cause weakness. There are some older pre-emergent things that we use in the nursery industry that could basically down right at the base where the stem of the plant goes into the pot, it would weaken that. Plants would just break off at the top of the container. But that chemistry's come a long way since then. But anyway, I don't use any pre-emergent herbicide. And nurseries are even trying to use less and less of it. Okay. Best materials to make a makeshift greenhouse to protect tropicals in 9B Texas and the Gulf. So if you're in 9B, you don't have to protect them much, right? But I do think you'd want some sort of poly protection. So this house is made out of steel tubes and 2x4s framed around it. This is an inexpensive. It's a metal roof that's been added to it, and I don't know if that was added later, but this is a 2x4 and construction here. If you go back and look at my propagation videos in the past, I showed a lot of alternative ways to build greenhouses. So I have a pipe bender at the house that I can bend the top rail from a chain link fence into these arches like you see up here. That's a really inexpensive way, and then you can just get a white poly like this is right here. I don't use clear poly. Clear poly is going to heat up a lot during the day, and I don't want to heat the greenhouse up. I just want to keep it slightly warmer than it is outside without creating growth on them. I don't want them growing all winter because then they're more vulnerable to cold. So here in this nursery, This is a white poly greenhouse. As you can see, the white plastic. It's inexpensive materials initially. They're just steel tubes with 2x4s put on them. Again, it's had some sort of metal roof, maybe engineered later. And then they have roll-up sides on this one and doors that open on the ends. And so during the day, when it's actually warm outside, they'll open it up. They don't want to build too much heat up inside. And then in the evening, they'll roll down those sides, close those doors up, and trap a little bit of heat inside overnight. And that's all you're going to need in Zone 9B in the Texas Gulf area, unless you get abnormal cold, and then you're going to need to throw some sort of heater in there potentially for the winter. But if you go back to my propagation series that I shot in the past, I showed a lot of different ways to build greenhouses. Inexpensive lumber, but the top rail from a chain link fence is a really great way to do it. And you can get one of those pipe benders. I probably have one listed in my Amazon store below the video here. Let's see. When amending the clay soil in beds, is it better to do it by hole or the entire bed? Okay. For me, I would prefer to do the entire bed. When I moved into my old house, I tilled the entire garden. It was all new construction, so there was no life in the soil. So I did till that entire space initially. And the only thing I tilled here at the new house was the vegetable garden and the place for where the turf grass initially went before we took it out. Nothing else got tilled in that garden. But if I was going to try to amend, if I really wanted to, so I amend from the top down. You guys have been watching this channel long enough to know that I'm not tilling anything into the soil. I'm just doing the wood chips or compost on top of it. And then when holes get dug, stuff gets mixed in. So that's the way I would do it. I don't really want to go in there and till or amend it too much. But if I was going to, I'd prefer to do the whole bed at once. But if that's not accessible, if you don't have a tiller or whatever, then you can amend hole to hole. If you want to amend the soil, you can that way, hole to hole. So I think it's whatever you want to do. But again, if I was going to change the soil in some way, I'd want to do it across the whole area, because if I do it hole to hole, I potentially create little pockets where water is going to get into, right? And I can change how water is going to act across the soil and into the soil, right? And end up drowning plants potentially. But if I amend the whole thing, then everything is going to take water in at the same rate, whether that's too much or too little, but it's going to be the same. So if I were going to till, and I don't, I would want to do the whole thing and not amending plants hole to hole necessarily. Okay. This person bought plant tone in the spring and it's unused. Can they use it now? Is it still effective? You can use it now if you want. It's getting colder outside. This rain's getting heavier. It's getting colder outside, and so it's not going to be effective to put it out now. But I mean, it's not going to do anything but sit there until spring. So you can use it if you want to. It's still fine. It's not a problem as long as it stayed dry. The issue with fertilizers is if they get wet, and then you put them out, they can dump nutrients much quicker. These organic fertilizers, not so much. Synthetic fertilizers, though, for sure, if they get wet, you have to be really careful with them when you use them, because they can just literally dump all those nutrients at one time and burn your plants potentially. This plant tone is fine. If you just wanted to hold it at this point until February, I think it would be fine. Just keep it in a dry place. But you could put it out now. Wouldn't have any negative consequences. It's not like the plants are going to grow as they're going to sleep here. But I would just hold it till February or March and use it then. This person has well water in Connecticut. Is it the same as rainwater as it filters down, or does it change? Well, if you're getting water out of a well, it's going to be, the pH is going to probably be potentially different than surface water. Rain is going to fall at whatever pH it is. It's going to run across the land through a creek upstream, maybe underground a little bit, and ends up in a river, in a reservoir or whatever, and then, you know, they treat it and send it to you. So it's going to be, the pH is likely going to be different than water that has, for, you know, when you're pulling well water out of the ground, it's not last year's water. It takes a long time for water to go through the ground. We were in Charlie and I were in one of the national parks in a cave, and, you know, the water can take decades or hundreds of years to go through rock to make it down into the areas that we, you know, if we're drilling pretty deep, well, the deeper the well, obviously the longer that water took to get down there. So it can be a long time. So that water could change a lot. If it goes through lime, you know, it could end up with a very high pH. If it goes through limestone. So likely the water that's coming out of your tap in your house, if it's from the city, is going to be different than somebody's well that's right down the street, potentially. Potentially. They could be similar. They could be the same. This person's trying to root cuttings. Will the water inhibit root growth? Water could potentially inhibit root growth, but probably not root initiation. So I don't think, as long as the water's clean, whether it's well water, city water, you know, that has chemicals in it, potentially, I think as long as the water doesn't have disease-related issues that could be introduced into it, so like a pond or something like that is not something you'd want to root. Pond water is okay to, on these plants that don't have wounds on them in here, like these Japanese maples, you can use surface pond water or lake water or whatever, as long as it's has some sort of aeration to it. You know, they'll put an aerator in the pond. You can use over these established plants, but when we're rooting cuttings, I used well water, really good well water at my nursery, and had no issues. I don't think you're having an issue rooting plants, probably because of your water. I think it's, as long as it's, again, doesn't have some sort of disease issue. I wonder if you have something else going on. Maybe need to add some additional heat to the space that you're trying to root them in. The material that you're actually taking off the plant. Again, I got that playlist on plant propagation on the channel, and, you know, maybe some of that would help you. You can, though, send that water off if you want to and get it tested and see what the pH is. You know, most of these plants want a pH somewhere around 6, and if your, you know, water is 7.5 or 8, it will have some impact on that soil that you're rooting things in. But I don't think your initial root initiation is probably anything to do with that. You know, as long as it's clean water. Somebody asked how tall I am. Well, I got a lot of comments about that from the Erin videos, because Erin and I standing next to each other. I think she's like, I don't know how tall she is, 5'2" or 5'3" or 5'4", I have no idea, but I'm 6 foot tall. Sometimes when you're standing, like I'm filming with Matt or Tim, and, you know, Matt is pretty tall, and Tim's not short, he's just a little short. But the three of us next to one another, you know, Tim's probably a hair shorter than me, and Matt is quite tall. But sometimes it depends on where you're standing in the garden too, as you're talking. Where, you know, Steph will be filming us, and we're trying to figure out where to stand, where that person can talk or I can talk or whatever, and then one person ends up looking like a giant and the other person ends up looking tiny, and it's just out of frame. But 6 foot, there's the answer to that. Let's see. This person, there were several questions. I'm just going to throw this out as several questions about deer resistant plants. This person had dwarf paniculatas eaten. There was somebody asking about other hydrangeas, whether they were deer resistant. Most are not deer resistant. And we did a video on deer resistant plants a couple months back. You can go back and take a look at that video on the channel. The other thing you can do is go to that Rutgers University has a list of deer resistant plants. You can just Google Rutgers deer resistant plants, and there's a list on there, and they kind of rank them by A, B, C, or D. The A's are things that they just hardly ever eat. D's are things that are, if you put in your garden, are like candy to them. You can start with that list. Keep in mind, your deer are different than my deer. You know, I had deer in the garden all season, and we didn't have a single hosta eaten, but we had all kinds of strange things that are on deer resistant list eaten. So one person's deer is not the same as another person's. For some reason, they just never found my hosta, which is like the #1 thing in a lot of gardens that get eaten. But it is a good starting point anyway. I would highly recommend that Rutgers list. If you really just don't want to ever lose anything, I would stick with the A's. The B's are going to be things that are considered deer resistant, but are sometimes harmed by deer. So I'll let you decide on it. It at least divides it into categories where you can say, you know, the C's and D's need to be up against the foundation, or someplace that just clearly are not going to have deer in them. Would a metal garage add protection for plants? Sun hitting it in the winter, would it be a little warmer? Yeah, it'd be a little bit warmer. Plastic is still going to be the best though, because these plastics allow light penetration through them, and then the light reflects back out, but the heat stays inside. Basically the heat that's generated by this gets, you know, kept inside, and I don't think you're going to get that in that metal building quite as much. It'll heat up a little, but this white poly right here is the perfect material for allowing light to penetrate through it and escape, and the heat to be retained within that bubble. So I think you'll get a little bit of protection. The one thing you get from a metal building is you can throw a heater in it, and it doesn't have to be a heater that's special for a greenhouse that can take moisture, you know, has moisture problems. I mean, a metal building, you can plug a heater in, some sort of space heater if it gets particularly cold, and heat that building up at night without having to buy, you know, some sort of greenhouse heater that's designed for these high moisture environment. So that would be one advantage, is I think you could add supplemental heat easier in a metal building, but I don't think you're going to get the kind of heat that you're looking for that you'd get by using plastic. I think that's the best way to say that. This person bought a Vitex from my nursery, and it took off this year and suckered. Are they grafted? There are some Vitex that might be out in the world grafted because the person was trying to have a high grafted plant that was a single trunk, you know, but for the most part, no, they're not grafted. They're pretty easy. They're so fast to grow that they can be trained into single trunk specimens without grafting. Do the suckers harm vigor of the plant? If grafted, so they're not grafted, not at all. They were just rooted cuttings. I probably rooted those Vitex if you bought them from me, but suckers can eventually harm the vigor of a plant if you have 25 different plants basically trying to grow and competing off the same root system for the same moisture and the same sunlight and the same everything. That's going to have a negative impact at some point. Plus, some things can get so thick. Vitex tends to be resistant to, it has a really smelly foliage, so it tends to be resistant to things like deer or chewing insects or anything messing with the leaves a whole lot. So it probably doesn't matter as much on a Vitex, but a lot of things get too crowded, then that becomes a hiding place for insects to get in there and really do some damage as well. Hiding place for bad guys, basically. But I would not want a Vitex that has 25 trunks. I would want the one that it initially had, or maybe 3 or 5, and have them going out away from one another. So I would start cutting those suckers off. Unfortunately, once your Vitex starts suckering, it's going to be an every year occurrence that you get. Probably twice a year, you need to go down to the base of it. If you want to keep a new one somewhere, you can, or cut them all off. Number 16, how did Steph and I meet? We actually worked together at a garden center when we were younger. So that was 1990-ish, 80, yeah, 1990. We worked together for a year or two, and we dated for like 4 years during that time. Then we actually broke up and had separate lives. And I have a son with someone else, and she has 2 children with someone else. And then we got back together a few years ago. So that's how that happened. But we've been together now for maybe 9-10 years total, but at two separate times. 10 years, maybe something like that. Maybe 11 even. Let's see. This person has 3-year-old blueberries in Gastonia. Gastonia is a suburb of Charlotte, North Carolina. They're not in enough sun. They're scraggly, but they survived. Is it worth transplanting them to more sun or start new? Yeah, I'd definitely transplant them to more sun. I wouldn't hesitate to transplant them to more sun and give them a season maybe before you completely give up on them. If you get them out to the right place, if they're alive, you know, they should take off. Hopefully they've done a little bit of rooting and you can get some roots there moved as well. Okay, so I said, you know, with this updated zone map thing, I did the video with Tony Avent on the new updated zone map, and you know how half the people in the country were moved up a half a zone on the zone map. And I said in last week's video that the map itself has become slightly less useful because, you know, despite the fact that we've had warmer temperatures, that, you know, the cold temperature that you're going to get didn't change, you know, at all. You know, just because your average temperature went up doesn't mean that one night during that time period isn't going to be super cold. You know, so saying that I'm now in zone 8A instead of 7B doesn't mean that all of my zone 8 plants are now just fine forever and ever. But this person says I needed to accept the updated gardening zone, and that saying nothing has changed isn't accurate because it has changed. Average temperatures have changed, calculated the same way using 10-year average. It's actually 2 15-year averages. It's not a 10-year average. The zone map is made up of 2 15-year data sets. And so we're at 30 years of data in that zone map. And what I'm saying is, I didn't mean nothing has changed in that. What I meant by nothing has changed is nothing has changed for anyone in how cold it's going to get in your area. Obviously the temperatures have changed. You know, we know that, you know, when the current 15-year data set skewed the map so much that half of America went into a higher zone. So that's really wild. I mean, obviously it has warmed substantially. My point here is not denying that it's not warmer. Obviously it's warmer. I mean, we can all know it's warmer. But my point here being is that folks that are risk averse and don't want plants to die that they purchased also need to understand that it did not change the coldest temperatures that happened during that time. We saw the coldest temperatures that had ever been recorded in Texas during this 15-year data set. We saw water pipes burst in Austin and other places during this 15-year data set. We've seen this past year snow in Pensacola, 8 inches of snow in Pensacola. Okay, we were in South Florida last year in January, and it's normally, you know, 70 degrees. It's pretty mild. 75 degrees. It was 50 for high one day in Key West because of that snow in Pensacola. So my point here being is that yes, and I think when we get the next update to the zone map, we're all going to move into another half a zone. We're going to see this continue to happen. We know it's going to happen. So it's not anything like that. What I'm saying is that people who are risk averse, all of a sudden the map puts you in a higher zone, and then you go purchase very expensive plants to put in, but then you still receive the same cold temperature received in the past. That's my point. You're no less likely, we're just as likely as we've ever been to get a 0-degree night in Raleigh, which is well below any average that we would have in a normal winter. But we're also more likely to have lots more 100-degree days during the summertime. So that's my point. I just want to make sure I clear that up. Okay, there you go, enough of that. This person has volunteer perennials in their garden. How long would you allow them to develop before you transplant them? Mainly perennials. I would dig them up sooner than later. If something comes up from seed in your garden, it's not like this container. So if I pick this container Japanese maple up, this is a very engineered plant. The roots are all the way around. In fact, I can see them coming out of the bottom of this very healthy Japanese maple here. I don't know what variety this is. Actually, it's Orangeola. It's actually a really great weeper. But when you buy this in a container, you know where the roots are, right? They're very contained in that container. And they're going in all directions. And so you can pull at them, and you know when you're planting that thing in the ground, I'm trying to sit on one back here, you know when you're putting it in the ground that it's that the roots are going to go in all directions. When something comes up from seed, it's going to go where it wants to go, and so the roots may go that way. So when you're digging something up in the wild that's volunteered to be there, the roots aren't going to be in a perfect circle like they are in a container plant. And so I think you'd start digging in this perfect circle and then realize all the roots actually went that way. So if I see something germinate and I want to keep it, I'm probably going to get it out of there pretty quick before it all of a sudden runs all its roots that direction, and then I end up cutting them off later. So at a minimum, I'd get them up, get them in a container and grow them out for a little while. If you wanted to, if they were really small, or go ahead and move them at that time. But the longer you wait for something that's come up from seed to move it, the more likely it is to be weird or damaged in moving it. My opinion of plants with 3 plugs in them, so like buying a 3-gallon container and then having 3 different plugs in it, it's not my favorite thing. It's become the norm on a lot of plants. It's just the nurseryman measuring time and saying, if I put 3 sky pencil holly cuttings or 3 compacta holly cuttings in the container at the same time, I can now finish that plant in 18 months or 12 months rather than 2.5 years. And so they're willing to pay somebody to sit there and do 3 rooted cuttings instead of 1 rooted cutting, which takes, 5 minutes, or less than 20 seconds to stick 3 of those cuttings probably, versus a year that it's going to save them growing. But at the end of the day, I would prefer not to have, I would prefer to have individual cuttings in each container. But that, again, the economics of this are tough. You think, you look at all this in this greenhouse right now, and this is a fairly high valued crop. I mean, we all know that Japanese maples are not inexpensive, but every single one of these was grafted. This took super, super high end labor. And these plants are sitting here west of Portland, and you're watching me from Raleigh, North Carolina, or Greenville, South Carolina, or someplace like that. How are they going to get them to you? Plus, the soil mix that's in this container, that plastic container, the fertilizer that's gone into it. There's a lot of production cost here, and then a tremendous amount of fuel to ship them across the country. And so the economics of this are really tight. They're really tight. And the difference between a plant being on the shelf at a garden center or a box store or wherever you're buying plants, that plant being $35 or being $50, that difference there is the difference in whether you're going to purchase it or not. And that's known, and so, the economics of it are very tight. And so there are probably a couple of decisions out there that I'm not that fond of, but they also are going to save so much time in growing that plant out that it's going to be less expensive when it ends up on a table too. So, I don't know what the answer is to that one, but I would prefer to just have 1 plug in the plant. Let's see. Okay. This is pretty funny. Number 21, the final one is, can we make a conifer killer shirt for those of us who in zone 9A? So I have, and in fact, I have my conifer collector shirt on right now, but it's under this pullover I have on. But yes, a conifer killer shirt for those of us in the South is probably probably a pretty good shirt. The videos we've shot here before the rain is running us out of here, we're showing off some incredible large conifers here. I don't know, you'll probably seen at least one video from here before this video has gone up, but there's some incredible specimens of plants in the ground here. Don't let that scare you off sometimes. If you see something that's been in the ground for 50 years, it ain't gonna grow that big in your garden for a long, long time. So, the tags on the plants are more like 10 years. If the plant says it gets 4 to 6 feet, that's 10 years. You can maintain it at that. But when something's in the ground for like 50 years and it didn't read the tag, they get pretty big. There's some things tagged in this nursery, in this place, and there's one in a tour video coming up. I don't know if it will have come up or not. but it's a Cryptomeria that was originally tagged Nana because they thought it was going to be a dwarf, and it's 30 or 40 feet tall in this garden here, so that's kind of fun. So ask gardening questions in the comment section below this video, and that's where I pick from each week. We've gotten, there's probably another 20, 21. I'll shoot another one of these in the next couple of days while I'm in these nurseries in these beautiful settings. And thank you guys so much for following along.